It occurred to me that, Davos, would it be fair to say it's almost like the Green Bay Packers of European hockey? Like, I was shocked when I read it. It's like 10,000 folks live there. Like, that's it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not local. Like the locals that live here is, like you said, 10 to 12,000.
Wow.
And then during the Spengler Cup and Christmas time, it triples. And then after Christmas, then 2 weeks later, the World Economic Forum comes, and then it like quadruples. So it's like almost 100,000 or 100,000%. It's crazy. 80 to 1,000 or 100,000. So it's it's a small town, but I think there's a few smaller teams in Switzerland, and the fan base actually comes kind of from the region. So
Really?
Yeah, and what's cool about Davos is our region actually covers all of Switzerland, because it's like an original six team. So many people that have lived all over Switzerland have some sort of connection to either hockey, because they were kind of the best in Europe for years, or to the Spengler Cup, where at Christmas time they would come up, spend time with their family, go and watch hockey, or be at home watching hockey on TV with Christmas and all that. Kind of similar in Canada with like World Juniors, say. When people sit around and watch and you got Christmas, it's the same. So when we travel and we go to other teams, we actually have like a lot of fans in away arenas, which is that's totally different than what I was used to before.
Oh man. So you're like the Toronto Maple Leafs minus the 4 p.m. Pacific start when you come out and play the Canucks. That pisses everybody off. Yeah.
I remember being in Vancouver, and I think it was an exhibition game, and the Rangers came in, and the Rangers scored, and like half the arena was cheering. I was like, oh my gosh. And then after that, then it was Montreal, right? And then again, I think we ended up playing against Detroit. Like, so those original six teams that come, like 100%. People cheer for. Yeah. So you get that. That would be the same when we go to we went to Zurich last year. I was first time head coach in Davos. We're in Zurich, and they have a 12,000, 13,000 seat arena full. And we scored first. And I swear, like half of the standing side on the other side stood up and cheered, and kind of like caught me off guard on the bench. Like, oh my gosh, like this is pretty awesome.
That's wild. So, and it's crazy too. Like, I was trying to think, like the club was founded in 1921. I mean, I'm just curious, like, where does hockey rank in Switzerland in terms of popularity? Like, I know like they've got a great soccer program or football program, but it's clearly there seems to be a real passion for the sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say there's two, right? You got football or soccer, right? Like European football, and then hockey. And it kind of changes from like canton to canton, which would be like state to state. So you have like the state of or canton of Basel is very much football. So very much soccer. Like they've tried to have hockey teams there. It just doesn't quite work. But then you go to, say, Zurich, you have both. But then you come to like Graubünden, like where we live up in the Swiss mountains. I mean, then it's just like straight hockey. Like everything's hockey. So, and I think that's the same throughout Europe. Like you go to Germany, like obviously soccer's extremely big there. Like
For sure.
Like let's say the investment or revenue and whatnot that comes from that is significantly different than hockey.
Yeah.
But you still get some towns in Germany, in France, even in Italy and Austria, and then of course Sweden, Finland, into Switzerland. That, I mean, the hockey's like they're extremely, extremely passionate about.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's funny. Like we had, Mark Crawford, for example. He was on the show last year, and it's like you're going through the visuals, because they just won it, and it's hard to fathom just the fan experience, the pageantry, like everything. It looks so unique to what we see at a sporting event over here in North America. I think the one thing that most people are familiar with is the Spengler Cup. What's the history of that? Like, why is it that tournament has been around for, gosh, it's almost 100 years now?
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically, the easiest way to describe it is it's one of the oldest like club tournaments that was just formed. So it's just kind of like a club tournament that they formed years ago and kind of brought in a few teams just to have like a small competition over a couple of days at Christmas for every people to basically enjoy hockey. And then it's just kind of evolved to now, like where now present day, like if you have the chance to, of course, watching is one thing, but to be a part of it and see like everything that goes on here, like it's a whole event, and it's truly amazing. Like people in Switzerland, they buy like, instead of just getting tickets for the game, they'll buy a package for the whole thing. So you get an afternoon game, you get a night game, and that goes on for 4 or 5 days until the final. So people just come up, watch hockey. There's a little, like almost like little Swiss chalets that they set up that where you can have like fondue, or you can have cheese in that one, or you can have like some bratwurst like over in that one. And they have like little beer tents or trying some different Swiss beers. And so the whole thing, I think, just from it starting as a basic club tournament, has evolved to what we like to say is like almost like a small mini world championships. Because now we got like clubs from like Sweden, Finland, Germany, I mean, even other teams in Switzerland, like they're interested to come and join it because it's a good competition. You're playing against some of the best teams in Europe. You kind of gauge yourself. You're all in basically for 4 or 5 days, and just to see where your team stacks up and, try to win something that has a huge history.
No kidding. And is there a purse for the tournament as well? If you winning team?
That nothing comes into our pockets I know of, but
Yeah.
what it does do is it actually helps I know that the teams that come, a lot of their stuff's covered, right? So they get sponsored to come in, okay, for hotels and for like some meals and that kind of thing. So because otherwise it would be extremely expensive. But then the whole event, it obviously helps our team in reference to our budget for the whole season. So
Got it. Makes sense.
Having that tournament, it kind of it takes us from maybe being a middle place budget team to maybe pushing us to a little bit above the average of the whole league. So we can invest that, for players in the future or other things.
So last year's your first season coaching in Davos, and you win the Spengler Cup. Again, just from an outsider's perspective, I'm like, I mean, out of all the things you could have done in year one, that would have to rank as one of the most important, I would think.
Yeah. And to be honest, I don't know if it's set in after, but during, like we were just so busy with so much going on. Coaching's like a washing machine. Like once it's on and the spin cycle's going, like, you're just like, right. So, okay. Yeah. So you're in the washing machine and you go from like, we play the 27th, then we play the 28th, then we won both those, and it was the 29th was off. Then we had like, I can't remember how it went or whatever, but it was basically, 4 games in 5 days, and it all happened so fast that you're just preparing, giving the guys a plan, going back after, like reviewing everything. Okay, what should we do? What'll help us for the next one, into that one, on. And, it just kept going. And then all of a sudden we're standing on the ice, confetti's coming down, taking a picture. If you look at the team picture, it's a funny one. I'm kind of just off to the side, like, what is this? Like a smile that wasn't like, yeah, it was more like, oh my gosh, really? Surreal.
You know what? It's so funny you say that, because for all the conversations we've had on this show, when you talk to coaches that, win a championship, that seems to be kind of the overriding emotion. It's like your perception of what it's going to be like to win. Like once it happens, it's probably has a lot to do with the washing machine analogy you make as a coach. You're like, hey, great. On to the next thing. Yeah. Anticlimactic.
Honestly, that's the only way to describe that one. And of course, looking back on it, I wish I could have enjoyed it maybe more, but it definitely was a helpful spot, just maybe even personally, just for me to realize, like, okay, like the plan's working, like what we're doing is good, like we know how to win.
Yeah,
we had to win something, and we can bring that back to the guys that are still part of the club, but the majority of them are still here. We can put that on the table and be like, we've done it before, so expectations are we know what to do again. So this is what we need to adjust. This is what we need to change. This is what we need to get better at to get us back to that level.
You've talked about the importance of getting 1% better every day. When you were first hired. Now that you've had a year under your belt, when you get into this part of the season, on the stretch drive to the playoffs, what are maybe some of the areas that you're hoping to get 1% better in?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question, because I think that is kind of always evolving. But where can the individual guy? Where can we as a team? Because like the last night we lost 4-0 in Bern. The game wasn't a 4-0 game. If you look at the analytics, statistically, we were better 5-on-5. They had more chance on their power play, but they didn't score, and we didn't get anything on our power play. So special teams were even. But what can we do to get better? And it wasn't the effort. It just was the attention to detail to being ready from the beginning of the game. So now we kind of focus today on what's going to happen a lot in the next game that we could benefit. So we started talking about face-offs because there's 50 to 65 face-offs every game, right?
Yeah.
That are opportunities for us to be like ready. So that was kind of like the trigger today. So those little 1% things, that's kind of team-wise, individually. Maybe there's some guys we talked to about little individual things to help trigger them for how they need to be ready for tomorrow. But right now, I'd say it's kind of like an evolving thing that we're looking for, that we always connect, like what our game plan was, how was it, and what'll benefit us for the next game. So that's kind of always how we practice in between. What was good, what was bad, practice that, highlight some things, and then move on into the game. But whatever we practice, it has to benefit that game, the next one.
You're not doing flow drills.
Sometimes, but not so often. No.
So what does that workflow look like? I'm assuming you guys are busing in your league. So is it like you're playing in Bern on the bus right back, you're huddling at the front with your assistant coaches, and you're putting that practice together? Here's the areas we got to work on. And I imagine it's a pretty quick turnaround from when you jump on that bus to when you hop on the ice for practice today.
Yes. So I guess if we look at last week, we played Wednesday night. Then we had a Thursday quick skate, just touched the ice, just went over some stuff to connect that game into Friday. Then we played Friday, then we played Saturday. So it was actually 2 days ago, that game. But 3 games in 4 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had 1 home game, 1 road game, or 2 home games, 1 road game. But yeah, we're on the bus, working, going through the video. We've got 2 other assistant coaches. One guy's Glenn Metropolit, who, remember that name? He played Montreal, Philly, Boston, and Tampa. He was in and around there. So he's an assistant coach. He runs the forwards. So he has like an area. So basically everything from the blue line in, he kind of covers. So forecheck, ozone play, face-offs. We have him check that stuff out. And then the other assistant coach is Valtteri Immonen, like a really well-established Finnish guy, played for the Finnish national team. And he won, I want to say 4 or 5 championships with Jokerit back in the 90s. Yeah, and his jersey's up in the rafters there, and he was the captain of the team. So he's a very respectful guy in Europe, and he runs the defense. So he does everything from the defensive blue line in. So kind of like coming home, we call those sort outs, right? D-zone coverage. And then we added breakouts into him, so we give him some stuff with the puck. It's not just without.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of cover everything in between. So kind of through the neutral zone, and then touch a little bit in the O zone, touch a little bit in D zone, kind of just what our game plan was and how things worked. So that workflow goes, and then we'll just reevaluate like the next morning, whether it's a practice or another game, and see what was good, what was bad, and then kind of come up with a plan together as to what do we show the guys that will benefit them, for the next game or for the next practice, or for how we want to look moving forward.
Well, man, that's like one of the most unique sort of breakdown in terms of, I guess, the job descriptions amongst the staff and how you look at that. You mentioned, I thought this was interesting. You mentioned when you were hired that, effectively there are 4 basic skills in hockey. I have a sense of what that means. I'm curious to hear you explain it.
So, I mean, the 4 basic skills, right? Skating, passing, shooting, and stick handling. And if we can put them in that order, there's a reason for it. Because skating, like if a guy can skate and he can get there, that's good. But once he gets there, then it's like a mindset thing, right? So if we tell a guy to skate on the forecheck, he has to be able to skate and get there. So we can work with him like how to skate, how to get there. But once he gets that situation, then it's a mindset for him to like, okay, engage, stay invested, kind of go through the fire and, stay in there. The other part's passing, right? Like if you want to play puck possession, which is kind of the game we want to play, you have to be able to pass the puck. So that doesn't just mean, tape to tape. It means like area plays, slide passes, board passes. It's an array of passing skills that can help drive the offense or drive possession so that you're kind of keeping it. Then the third is shooting, right? So if you can pass, you should be able to shoot. You can pass the puck in the back of the net,
Yeah.
right? Or find a way to shoot it. And then the last is stick handling, because you can't. You can teach everybody roughly how to handle the puck, but
Yeah.
there's so many guys now that I feel overhandle the puck. Like they'll be skating to the neutral zone and they're just stick handling for no reason rather than just like push it. So what we try to do with our guys or like younger kind of development is not so much like beating guys one-on-one, but it's more puck protection and body position. So instead of
Yeah.
saying like, hey, you got to beat this guy one-on-one, it's like not old school, like you versus me, like here I come, and put it through the legs, put it through a triangle. Because in pro hockey in Europe, in Switzerland, one of the best leagues in Europe, all the defensemen are good. And they teach you how to play the body. So it's not like, they're just kind of like going to try to take the puck and not get hit. Like they're ready for you. They're going to take you out. So it has to be more on the puck protection, body position. How can you angle yourself and keep it and protect it, and then look for help and then try to move after that. So those are kind of like the 4 basic skills.
So I want to use passing as an example. And I think what you highlighted there is that, I think when we think passing, like, um, I guess you could almost equate passing to sort of like golf, right? Like you got a number of clubs in your bag, and each one does something different. And you gotta go to the range and work on every one if you want to put it all together in a round. As a pro team, how often in say a week would you be working on drills specific to just sharpening passing skills?
Quite a bit. Like usually how our practices are structured. So we'll have like kind of one warm up drill, and that warm up could be like, we call it like monkey in the middle, right? You got one guy inside the circle, the other guys are out, and they have to one touch pass it, and the guy in the middle's got to try and stop it. And once he gets it, then he gets out, and the other guy goes, right? Like, so that's just like a warm up. Once we have the warm up, then we'll go into some either 1-on-0, 2-on-0, 3-on-0 type drills where it's passing, it's touching, it's moving, you're finishing with a shot, guys heading towards the net. The goalies, the drills the goalies don't like.
Yeah, exactly.
We
Yeah.
got lots of shots, but within that, we try to have as many puck touches as we can as well. So it's maybe 2 forwards working together, but they're also working with the Ds. So the 2 forwards pass, they give it to the Ds. The 2 Ds pass, they give it back to the forwards. The forwards pass again, and then a shot happens. Then after that, then we'll kind of get into maybe like some sort of odd man situation. Like we try to outnumber the defense. So how we can, again, work on slide passes, area plays, board passes, cycling type things, or quick attacks off the rush. And then we'll maybe play some 5-on-5 or some even situation, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-5. But back to your original question, I mean, we always try to highlight and challenge the guys with that focusing of passing. Because if you're the first guy in line and you're standing there, and you're kind of like standing on your heels, waiting to see, like getting it, throwing sauce passes, there's just a difference to when you're standing there, knees bent, on your toes, stick on the ice, like, give me the puck, give me the puck. So that's, I mean, even at the pro level, that's something we're reminding them of a lot.
I know. I believe it. You know what? It's funny. Bruce Cassidy was on the show once, and he said something that has stuck with me forever. And it was just that he's like, sometimes in hockey, it's like we feel like we always have to get out there for a 60-minute practice, for example. He goes, a lot of time, he goes, it's just like, it's like going to the driving range. It's like you just need a few touches. He's like, the feel of the puck for players, especially pro players, like they might just need 10, 15 minutes, but you have to get those touches in
Yeah.
consistently, because he goes, you can see it in the game when you go so long. And obviously the National League is practice is at a premium, but he goes, we can see it in our team. If we go, 5 days without a practice, without those just little touches, that it shows up in gameplay. One thing that stands out to me is that in the European game, you don't see as many pucks that maybe just get thrown at the net. And so the emphasis on passing, it would seem, is almost more important, in just in the sense that it seems like if you can't pass the puck and get the puck into an area to get a good scoring chance, given the bigger ice, like it can be really challenging to create offense. How do you think about just shot selection, and maybe any guidelines you give your players as to like, hey, here's some of the shots. If we get this look, we take it, but we rather not take some of these looks that maybe we see in North American hockey.
I just want to go back to because you gave him 2 references to golf, and I think it's awesome because Have you ever seen the Tiger Woods? He does like a video where he talks about how he compartmentalizes shots, and he has that grid out in front of him, and he tries to hit like the nine.
No, I
It's
haven't.
basically
But tell
so
me
it's
about it.
basically yeah. So it's like if you I'll try to use my screen. So it's like 1, 2, 3, right? 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8, 9. So he has this, and so then as he's talking through, he'll just take shots and he just tries to hit that. So he has a visual grid out in the uh, field, right, or range, and he's just trying to hit those areas. So he'll use a certain club and he'll use the same one, but he'll try to hit each one, and then he'll move on to the next club, and they'll try and hit that same thing. So it just goes back to like what you were talking about in regards to passing, repetitions, repetitions, repetitions. Then it goes to shooting. You know, like if I worked with a kid, I played with him and worked with him in Zug before, and we would go out and he would shoot pucks from a certain spot because he knew on the power play, like like a kind of like a high bumper spot, like top of the circle, but between there and the hash marks, kind of like there. He would work in there and he wouldn't move very much, but he'd just get it and he'd just get it and he'd just like zip it. And he would try to hit like short side with like 10, 15 pucks. Then he'd just move a little bit and he'd get it. And then he'd hit the other side, like high glove, 10, 15 pucks. Then he'd get it and then he'd go like low and then try to hit off the post. And I remember like just working with him and thinking like this is great. And then last year he scored 2 goals against us with just that same shot.
No
So I'm like,
kidding.
I
Yeah,
knew he
you
was,
got
yeah, I knew he was going to do it. But it's just like that repetition of him just taking those shots, taking those shots, taking those shots all the time. So I have to apologize for getting off track there, but I
no. You
just
know
think
what?
that
I think it's so important to share these stories. I think we always assume that the best of the best or excellence is like a product. It's like something. It's a magic potion or something, but it really is work. I mean, just even when you talk about that example, it comes to mind like Tony Granato talking about when he was in Pittsburgh as an assistant. Sydney did the exact same thing. They said after
yeah,
every practice, he would pick one spot on the ice, and same thing. He kind of had that same visual grid in the net, and he would have Tony go around and he'd pass him 20 pucks from like, below the goal line, 20 from like cross ice at the point, and he would just try and hit like every spot on the net, and then they'd move on. And gosh, I mean, if you're on social media, there's a million posts about Steph Curry and his routine at practice where he has to hit like I think it's 100 shots in a row before he leaves the court. Like it's wild, but same thing. It's like
yeah,
you gotta, reps removed doubt.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree. I think it's great, and that's something that we're trying to implement and help guys here because there's still a few older guys that have done something for a long time. You kind of get in your habits, you get in your routines, and it's just like, yeah, I'm good. But then you get those opportunities in the game. It might only come once in a while because even in practice, like who was it? He said Bruce Cassidy said like instead of practicing for an hour, he'd rather practice for 40 minutes of like high quality everything. Boom, okay, we're done. Looks good. We're out. Like, and that's kind of our thinking as well. Like practice with a purpose. Let's get it right. If it's not working, we stop it. We bring them back. This is what we're working on. Let's get it right, and we get it done because practicing again with a purpose and everything is of course what a lot of coaches talk about. But those repetitions, I mean, I couldn't encourage any young kid out there, and again, even up to pro. Like, there's a reason that Steph Curry is the all-time three-point leader shooter by a mile because this guy, like, all he does is shoot, 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 shoot. And there's, of course, we're talking about elite level high guys, but everyone has the opportunity. Everyone can set aside the time, and that's 100% like a choice as to how much that they want to do. And that's the fun part about coaching, and also the hard, is triggering the right things to get those guys to make those choices to like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's almost their choice.
That's in a way, right? And
Yeah.
that brings me to something that I really like. It's called like want to versus have to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, like, okay, I want to do this. I want to get better. I want to score more goals. I want to improve my shot. I want to improve my passing, or I have to take more shots. I have to improve my passing. I have to go to the rink today.
Totally.
And that, that mindset, we know where or people like that end up. It's not winning any awards or trophies or records.
No, but you know what? I think that's the it's. I think anybody that's been around, coaching or just sports long enough, right? Like we have all these like sort of phrases, catchphrases, but it's like they're really hard to implement and they're really hard to do. Like doing these things consistently over the course of a season, regardless of your sport, like that's hard. And I think, as you just said, like the great coaches can make it a want to versus a have to, and easier said than done, though, right? That's the art form. What now you mentioned youth hockey. Does Davos, do you have a youth academy as well?
Yes, yep, yeah. We have like a hockey academy. Some young guys that have come up from around the region, and there's like a campus. I think it can house up to 30 some kids. So
Oh wow.
yeah, yeah. So it's and we actually have a new training facility that was built 4 or 5 years ago that has some synthetic ice. It has a skating treadmill. Has like a goalie area for balance and light work. So this definitely, it's very hockey specific type
Yeah.
things for off ice and whatnot, and an extra sheet of ice. So yeah, there's lots of options for the guys, for the young kids coming up.
How involved are you with just that overall program structure? Just say like working with the coaches at the younger ages.
So the cool thing is we try to play roughly the same system. So I was able to implement kind of how we wanted to play, and then the coaches underneath. Of course, there's always small variations or adjustments depending on another team you're playing, and as you get younger, full structure, full system isn't completely necessary. You have to allow the kids to solve some things on their own, then work with them within their options that they choose. So I'm more involved with the coaches, and then we have like a U20, so like our junior program. Those would be the guys that if we have anybody that's sick or anybody that can't play, we have a few guys on our radar that would come up and practice with us that are right there. So we have 2 defensemen and 2 forwards that are knocking at the door, let's say, to get some ice time.
Yeah.
And so with that, I mostly talk with the other coaches how they feel they're playing. And then I also get my own visual as often as I can, go and watch a game or watch a few periods and check in on certain guys and see who else is evolving or developing it in a good way. But
Yeah.
it's definitely part of my job is not so much the development of the younger guys. It's more making sure of the integration of them coming up, and that we have some young guys that are going to be able to get some ice time.
So that's interesting. So when you call a player up, you don't have call it an American League team. Like you're pulling just from U20. That's a big jump, I would assume.
Yeah. So there is a second league in Switzerland, the Swiss League it's called. So you have the National League, then you have the Swiss League, and there are some teams that have direct cooperation, let's say, cooperation with them
Affiliation, yeah.
to bring affiliation to bring guys up. But we don't have that specifically. We have some guys that we've sent away to try to play that were under contract, but it's better that they play than come back. And we have the juniors that are kind of right here for practices and whatnot. But it's just kind of our philosophy that we try to bring up in house rather than send out. Too often
Yeah.
we try to do it here. Whereas some other teams, they'll send them to a Swiss League team for ice time or for specific things and kind of leave them there. But for right now, I mean, who knows? In the future, it would be great if we could have like one step in between, because now it's like, it'd be basically like taking a guy from the Western Hockey League or Ontario Hockey League and be like, okay, boom, right into, an NHL team, roughly. It's maybe a crazy comparison, but it's roughly like that idea. Like, I mean, you're going from U20 to pro.
Well, I'm just saying, like, it's one thing if you have one player that's out, like all of a sudden, like, shit happens, right? If you got 5 players that are out and the 5 players replacing them are all, 19 and 20 years old, like that's man, things change real quick all of a sudden.
Yes. And that's where you can see, like, there's some teams in Switzerland, that's where the GMs have a lot of hard work. Obviously, we could get a guy on a loan or something,
Sure,
that's
okay.
possible. Like there's some situations where that happened, but then that might defeat the purpose of us having these young guys, and like giving them their opportunity now to play. So of course you got to read it. So I don't think we'd get totally stuck where we would have like a whole line of juniors, but there's been some situations where, like last year in the playoffs, we were playing Lausanne. In Game 7, we went to Jeff Ward as a coach in Lausanne. Game 7, and we had 6 defensemen, and we had 11 forwards, and the 11th forward was a 16-year-old kid.
Really?
Just kind of guys were just getting hurt, and there's transfer windows, same like in North America, right? Deadline was out, and we're just like, oh man, and we were just kind of
Nothing you could
hanging
do.
on there. Not much you could do at the end there. Yeah.
Unreal. And what would you compare, say, the U20 league to in Switzerland, in North America? I mean, granted, it's been a while since you played over here, but
Yeah, I think I'd compare it maybe to the Quebec League. I
okay,
think
so like that's
there,
pretty good.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we have a kid that was playing U20 for us last year. His name's Lars Steiner, and he went over. He's playing in the Quebec League, and I think, you know, few, like, what, 15, 20 games in the season, he was right up in the top scoring. He was a 17-year-old kid. So he's a decent player. He can play. There's some guys that are pretty good. I think, this is my personal opinion, I think kids coming from Switzerland, I think it'd be better to maybe go like to the Western Hockey League or the Ontario Hockey League. Maybe it's a little more combative, a little bit more rougher in a different way, a little bit longer travel where you really got to kind of like battle and, go through some really tough times sitting on those buses. Because, in Switzerland, the travel is not that much. I think our longest trip is to Geneva, which is 5.5 hours.
Oh, really?
So we're home. We're home every night. We're not.
Oh man, you
Yeah.
got your PhD in bus travel when you're in Regina, I guess, eh?
Yeah.
So that's great anyway.
That's where I learned to sleep anywhere.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. When it comes to you've gone over there as a player, as a coach, and particularly now that you're not just coaching at the professional level, but you're kind of overseeing or part of overseeing a youth development program. Is there anything that stands out to you that we might be able to borrow or steal in North America from how things are done over there from a player development standpoint?
I don't know if it's totally been applied to how we want to work, but what we're trying to do is there's a difference between skills and game skills. And I think that's something that, the young kids that are coming up now in Switzerland where, everybody can stick handle, everybody can shoot. And a lot of guys try the, like, let's say Instagram moves, or TikTok moves, and then, which is cool, but I think I like watching John Tortorella when, somebody scores these goals that or tries something and his responses, because he's, very old school in that regard, which I respect and get. But we want to also allow the guys to have some creativity. But those game skills as a coach, like, those are like so valuable to giving your team an opportunity to win, and game skills of like building trust. So like take a centerman, for example. Like, how often do young centermen know, like, okay, what time is it in the game? Like, okay, who am I taking the face off against? What side is it on? Like, what should I try here? Like, okay, we're in the O zone, we're up by 2 goals. Like, should we just try something easier, or should we try like a 5-man up and everybody go to the net? Like,
Yeah.
or there's less than a minute left. It's a neutral zone face-off. Should we try to like do like a hinge and play with the puck, or should we say, hey, like strong side up, let's get it down the forecheck, make it hard for him to break out. So, or on breakouts, like half wall work. Like really scanning, knowing where the defenseman is, knowing who's coming, and then knowing how you can make a play. Back to the passing part of it, that would just be like a pass, like a board play, or get it and eat it, or take a hit. Like, those skills are so much more valuable than the guy getting it and beating 3 guys off the wall, because that's not going to happen every time.
Exactly.
Right? But him getting the puck, taking a hit, making sure it goes off the boards, the centerman supports and takes off, and we get a 2-on-1, we don't score, but like, that is much more valuable. So another thing that I really like as well, like how we try to work, is if a guy gets a breakaway and he doesn't score, he knows he's pissed. I remember one time I had a breakaway, I went and scored, I came back to the bench, pro hockey, and the coach is like, we needed that one. It's like, thanks.
Yeah, no,
like, I know.
Kidding. Yeah,
I know. Like, now I'm just sitting there thinking, like, of course we need that one. And then you get like more stressed.
Yeah, so you're not going to bury the next one.
Yeah, then it's just like the next one you're coming in, your hands are like so tight, and you come in and like, you beat the puck square and you can't put it in because you can't shoot it.
Yeah.
But what I try to do is go to the kid after he's calmed down and take 2 or 3 steps back and be like, okay, well, how did you get that chance? Oh yeah, it was a good pass from so-and-so. No, but what happened before that? Oh yeah, okay, well, the defenseman boxed out, we won the puck. No, but what happened before that? And like, try to go all the way back to like really what happened in that situation, so that he sees, okay, I was defensively smart. I blocked the shot, right? They got it back. Defenseman boxes out. We win the puck. We take off. He makes a good pass. I get a breakaway. So I said, like, it all started from you blocking that shot. It all started there. So if you do that more, you're going to get those chances more. So do that more. Do that more. And sometimes they listen. Sometimes they're just so mad that they didn't score.
No, but you know what? I think what you just described there is, and I just want to highlight because I think it's so valuable, right? Like we always talk about hockey sense and how you develop that. But I think there's a lot of merit to what you just described, asking players and ask them to sort of go back in the pictures in their mind and replay it. Just that exercise and forcing players to recall that, like that's hockey sense as much as scanning the ice or shoulder checking or anything like that. Like just having them visually recognize the sequences in the game and how all these things connect together. And listen, I mean that could be done with 8-year-olds. Just getting them to really think about the game and what's actually happening out there and building
Yeah.
awareness.
Who did you have on recently? I think it was maybe Tony Granado, and he was talking about when a guy has something, he said, "What do you see?"
Yeah.
Or something like that. Right? And what do you see? And then he said, "Then here's what I saw."
Yeah.
So next time maybe you have like this option or that option, and then what you did. So you kind of you give them options, so they still see that same play, but then the next time it's like, okay, here's what he saw. Here's what he saw. Maybe I could try something different. So it's not like, oh, that doesn't work. Like we needed that one. It's just like, okay, hey, what did you see? Yeah, I thought I saw a 5-hole, but he closed it. Okay, what if you give a little wrong info before? Or what if you just change your angle and just skate this way to make the goalie move? And then again, just to get them thinking, because the more I think you can not over, like, what's the word? Like, don't want to create overthinkers, but
Yeah.
just want to create like options that at some point it'll come back to them and they'll maybe be able to apply it.
How much of your approach is maybe based on your experience as a player? And I mean, use the example of the breakaway and just intuitively, you're like, yeah, I know that doesn't work because I've been on the other
Yeah.
side of that conversation. Are there any other examples of things that you've implemented, say in Davos, where you're like, hey, like I know from a player's perspective, this is really appreciated or maybe not so appreciated in terms of how coaches might approach certain things?
Mm-hmm. I think I don't want to say like, because there's some good coaches out there that didn't really play or didn't have long careers.
No doubt. Yeah.
So like, let's get that clear. But how they think and how they approach, I think the one biggest thing I think if I take away from both is the leadership part of it, and I really take pride in trying to communicate in a clear way, and just be something I need to get better at is honesty. And the honesty can't always start with something nice. Sometimes the honesty has to be like, hey, we need more. This is why. This is what we need. Like if a defenseman, part of his game is like, finishing guys, being hard to play against everything, it might not make sense to come up to him and be like, hey, you're a really good guy. I really like you and everything. But hey, can you box out more? Sometimes it has to be like, hey, like, who are you as a player? It's like, if he starts saying like, yeah, I'm a stick handler and everything, it's like, no. Who are you as a player? Like, what makes you catch somebody's eye in the stands? Oh yeah, okay. Well, when I'm finishing checks and like I'm hard to play against, and guys are yelling at me, like, yes. How can we get that more? So, I think the leadership, that's something that I took pride in as a player, was more just lead by example. I know I made some mistakes, standing up in front of the dressing room and screaming and yelling, trying to motivate through that. But I think in present day, that style of screaming and yelling is short-lived. And if
Yeah.
you select, it's kind of like shot selection, which we should get back to in ozone play.
Yeah.
But yelling selection, it should also be
Yeah.
the same, because then when you do it, then you catch the guys. So it's, if you're just yelling the whole game on the bench, or if you're yelling after every period, if you're yelling all practice long, eventually, it's just going to go over their heads. It's going to go over their heads. So try to be selective with your yelling choices. And the other thing about leadership, of course, talk communication, is body language. And I try to like be as calm and collective as I can with clear instructions, so that the guys hear it, or individually, just give that guy specifically clear information positive or negative or helpful, however it needs to be. But again, for me, I'm glad I was able to play for 20 years. And also looking back at that last year that I played, I don't know if you know the story, but I was like kind of the extra import in Zug. So you could dress 4 at the time, and I was the extra one. And we actually had a Swiss league team like in the same arena. So I mostly played with those young guys. So I was playing with basically our juniors,
So you're like a de
like
facto
for,
coach.
so it actually was. And that was kind of the idea that the club gave me, is like, listen, be our extra import. If someone's sick or someone's hurt, we got you, and you can play, but help these young guys and maybe you can get back into it. So during that time, would get called up because somebody would be sick, and I was right there. So I just had to move my stuff from one to the other, or phone call 5 minutes away from the arena. And I remember, taking the bus down to Geneva, getting 2 shifts in the first period, 1 shift in the second, no shifts in the third, no shifts in overtime, and then getting called to go take a penalty shot at 40 years old. Yeah. And I was like, oh man. And then the same thing happened in Davos like a few weeks later, like literally like no shifts the last half of the game. And then, get called, go take a penalty shot. But those times of sitting on the bench, sitting on the bus, reflecting, the next couple of years, I was able to go back to these younger guys and be like, hey, remember we were sitting on the bench in Geneva? Like, hey, like I just lived that with them. So I think it brought me in, and then it could open up like, okay, I'm here, Josh, I'm listening. Like, what are you thinking? To kind of like break down that barrier of being right there. So that transition, maybe it was, looking back on it, of course, was good, but it wasn't easy. And then finding that transition from really being that close to the guys, then to being like on the coaching side, that took a little bit of time, but that was.
I bet. But my understanding is you also spent time as a development coach within the Zug program. How beneficial was that? Maybe both in terms of just, I guess, being forced to like. It's one thing to know something; it's another thing to teach it, and just putting you in a position where you had to learn how to teach like actual mechanics of the game, and just overall maybe providing a bit of a bridge. So when you did get up to be an assistant coach, you had a few reps under your belt.
Yeah, it's actually funny when you say the word mechanics. So my wife's from Scottsdale, Arizona, and so we used to go back there in the summertime and looking for something to do. I had an adopted son at the time, and he was always looking for hockey in the summer. So we ended up kind of meeting some people, and we started this like hockey camp thing, and it was called Hockey Mechanics.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my
and the
God.
idea, yes. So the idea behind that was to break down skills, and this was like 2010, 2011, 2012. We did it for like 3-4 summers. And the idea was to kind of like break down skills and then like help these kids. So it's not just, again, like not just stick handling. And what we tried to do is create drills, and every drill had some sort of head speed. So it wasn't just skating around the pylons. It was like maybe like passing, then going around the pylons, then having to find the puck again, and then having to find the players, or going into the corner and having to look one way, look the other way, and then come out. And then once you got the puck, then somebody would move, and then they'd have to find them quick. So like onto those mechanics part of it. And that, anyways, fast forward to in Zug there, when I was the assistant coach, I stepped playing into assistant coach, second assistant coach for the first team, and then also doing some work with the academy guys. So some face-off stuff, just some ozone play, just some shooting, just kind of like angles, how to change the angle of puck, or even positioning your body, how to protect it, and kind of how to cut in, or even how to move yourself to make a pass or to find a lane, and that kind of stuff. So that development side of it was, I'd say, it was kind of basic. It wasn't a lot. It just was kind of here and there.
Yeah.
With it, but still, then once you're assistant coach, then we would have pre-ice, and the pre-ice is like a 20-minute time where guys could go out and we'd work on something. So guys would go out, and that's where we would try to like work on the skills. And then I'd always try to connect whatever skill drill we did, it would be connected to what we were doing in practice that day.
Sure.
So then the guys would get reps, maybe shooting from a certain area, making passes, picking up pucks somehow, some way there. Then when they would benefit from that, the guys that were on pre-ice, they were already a step ahead of I don't want to call them lazy, but it's the guys that didn't go on pre-ice because it's always optional.
Yeah.
You develop how you want, but the guys that didn't go on, they would be a step ahead, and then they would feel rewarded because, hey, I went on the pre-ice, I did this, now I'm a step ahead, and they would be doing those drills like boom, 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 pretty quick.
Yeah.
So that connection, that's just the development question. Yeah.
No, man. Listen, I think that's so important. And I mean, we see it, I think football's a good example where, players go into their specific positions and offensive linemen just work, you know, over and over again on taking that first step once the ball snapped. And, safeties work on just their hand positioning on the line. Like there's these little details, but it all fits. All those things matter when you get into the big picture. And I think that hockey is, and I think, particularly in youth hockey where, sometimes you'll walk into a rink and you'll see a group of 10-year-olds on one knee watching kids do a 5-on-0 breakout where there's a, it's not the X's and O's. It's the, can the kids catch and receive a pass? Can they escape, when they go and retrieve pucks? Those little, and those things aren't learned on a whiteboard. They're learned by doing over and over and over again. And the fact, I think it's great when you mention that pros are doing this. I just think it's a great teaching moment. But also a good segue back to the shooting conversation.
Yeah.
So I've sort of noticed that internationally, and we just had a bit of a glimpse of it with the Four Nations, that, European hockey and maybe international hockey, it's sort of found maybe of a hybrid from two different styles. But when you watch European pro hockey, I compare it to there's the rhythm of the game is there just seems to be a bit more patience, and especially offensively, and very similar to football or soccer, where it's like you're just waiting for you're trying to get that one grade A versus throwing as much against the wall as you can. How do you think about just the patience offensively, and what sort of a how do you put your players in a mindset that says, hey, like when we get this look, we take it, but otherwise we're going to be patient enough to hang on to it and try and wait for a good one.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because we're more shot selection. I think that's the best.
Yeah.
Than shot volume. And there are some teams in Switzerland that are shot volume, and they're shooting from everywhere.
Really?
The reason, yeah. So it's not all the same. And the reason that I don't like it is those bad angle shots. Like if a guy tries to score from a bad angle, then typically your team is somewhat unorganized, right? If he misses the net and it goes up off the glass, and then the rinks are a little bit wider, so when everyone's in the middle of the ice and a bad angle shot comes from the outside and goes, usually everyone's going towards the net. So then from everybody going towards the net and then the puck is out, the other team's heading the other way, and then you're kind of chasing. So that encouragement, I think, goes back to the pre-ice of the repetitions of like slot work, right? Like how to get in the slot, like how to move, how to find those little pockets of space, because they're there, but like same thing, shot volume. You don't want to just get it up to the D's and shoot it and have two guys at the net, because then there's going to be two forwards, there's going to be two defensemen, there's going to be a goalie. I mean, the chance of that going through is like 0.0 what? I don't know, but it's not great. But if you can have layers, right, and kind of moving layers, so you have like a guy net front that's kind of trying to take away a pass or some movement from the D, and then you have like an F3 in the high slot that is also like moving and going, and then those shots are coming through with timing and more layers. That's kind of more how we try to do it. And then through those puck retrievals, we try to use the back of the net a lot, right? And then what happens then a lot of teams will go down, they all collapse down low to the front of the net, and they try to make the zone big and then activate movement again. So with that movement, with those layers, then we just try to like find guys that can have shot selection. And this is something that we're looking to improve too, is that guys are looking more for one-timers, than like get it, stick handle, shoot.
Yeah.
Because there's not much time anymore, and if you do get it, it's got to be like, boop, boop, you got to zip it quick. And that's something that if we talk in 10 years, it'll probably be the same. Like how can we encourage guys to shoot quicker?
Well, it's just, I mean, it's top of mind, but I thought, when you look at the recent, I don't know if you had a chance to tune into the Four Nations face off, but two very memorable games between Canada and the U.S. But I would say like Canada, the one adjustment they made in the second game is that they were there seemed to be an emphasis on like if we get the puck, like we're going to rip it right away, and you could just see it's not always about scoring the goal, but it forces the other team to defend in maybe more of a panic mode because they don't get a chance to get set and they have to be more reactionary, which might in turn create more space or more opportunities later in a shift or later in a sequence. But when you talk about those layers, I'm assuming that means that the center, left winger, right winger, that's probably not as consequential. It's just you're working together and moving. But at what point, when you talk about like coming back and sorting things out in your own zone, like does the centerman at some point become the designated person to maybe come back and support down low, or is that sort of play out in every facet of the game that you're just jumping in and filling holes and rotating?
Yeah, in a way, we try to play somewhat positionless. So, like, if you take the offensive zone, right, you kind of have
Yeah,
like a net layer or net back, right, down low.
yeah,
Then you have like a slot, and then you have the D's layer. So from that, there's going to be some interchanges. If it goes D to D and the D skates down and one D slides over, we should get another guy up high, but still have a guy in the middle layer, still have a guy in the net layer. So we just don't want to end up with like necessarily three players in one layer too often and for too long. Right? Like, so if we get three guys up high, okay, good, and the shot goes through, then we got to get one guy out of there that's going to activate and go. And we don't want to have three guys at the net layer, and of course, unless we're heading in there, but we don't want three guys at the net layer waiting while the Ds are trying to shoot. If something fronts and it goes the other way, then you're chasing. So then coming home, I'd say it's the same. Like forecheck, whoever's the F1, he goes. Sometimes it's the center, sometimes it's the winger. And then whoever ends up coming back home first, we call him D3.
D3
So
like
yeah,
that.
so you have D1, you have D2, and then you have D3, and then you have like the forwards. So F1 coming home, he just becomes strong side, and then the last guy, he comes home to the middle of the ice and stops roughly hash marks, middle of the slot. So then that way, once we have D1, D2, D3, that visual hopefully has the first guy coming back, like, okay, I'm D3 because I'm first guy back, and then we kind of go into our D zone coverage accordingly.
How does again, you look at the National Hockey League, it would seem like if you want to win a Stanley Cup these days, you need six, tall, rangy defensemen who got a little bit of bite and are rangy, or have a good stick. But how does that what does the ideal defenseman look like, say, in your league, where again you're defending a bigger sheet of ice? Is it more of an emphasis on, say, the, mobility skating, or can you still win with those guys that can just lean on you over a 7-game series?
I think I think like a hybrid would be the elite defenseman.
Okay,
But
there you go. Yeah,
right?
it's funny you want six
Yeah,
Kale McCarrs. That's
yeah,
unique.
there you go. But okay, let's use him for example, because most defensemen, like something that we try to work on, I think that the NHL, maybe like you're saying where they take it from Europe, is gap, right?
Yeah,
Like a lot of guys talk about gap, and our gap typically works like outside in. So as we're going into the offensive zone, we like to go like outside and then come back through the dots. And then the forwards can pressure, and the Ds are like they can kind of read the play and wait to see what happens. So if we don't get a stop in the offensive zone, right, Ds are coming up. We see what happens. If the puck changes sides, D can pinch, right, and then the other guy just comes across, and then the F3 will come back. But if we don't get anything and then we get beat, D's back through the middle of the ice, forwards backtrack, try to kill. You put back pressure. We try to sandwich them in the neutral zone. If they make a kick out, then we just want our Ds to like slide, and then that D3, he just comes back to the weak side. So that's look. I don't know if that makes complete sense, but just the rough idea is,
yeah,
like you'd said, that the biggest quality for a defenseman is gap. And how do you do that? It's skating. And guys now, like, we know how it is. Like, they all train, they all work out, they all have some sort of yoga or Pilates or something, like, where they're working on their mobility and making sure that they're
yeah.
there, flexion in the ankles and all that. So back to the first skill, right, that we talk about for a player is, can he skate? Can he skate? And so when we're looking for defensemen, it's always like, how's his skating? And can we work with his gap? Like, and once the gap's there, then I think we can help with the other stuff. You can help with the passing, you can help with the puck protection, you can help with the shooting. But again, skating, that's in pro hockey, like, you're not going to be able to change a guy that drastically. It's yeah, but yeah,
Yeah,
skating.
and it's funny, like, just as you say that, you talk about the gap. I mean, it's obviously important at every level, but I could just see, like, given the extra width, especially of the rink, like, you could be dynamite in so many areas, but if you don't have that, you'd be almost playable, I would think, or you'd be such a liability if you couldn't gap up and defend off the rush.
Yes, 100, absolutely. So like there are some bigger guys that play the, but there is a difference. Like they can skate. If they can skate, you see like guys are so quick out of the corners, and it's those first 3-4 steps kind of everywhere, right? Like out of the corners or on the back check or on the forecheck, whatever. And then like we just brought over Brendan Lemieux. All right, so Brendan Lemieux, we brought him over at Christmas time. He played at the Spengler Cup, and he talked a lot about like, oh yeah, it's so much wider. It's so much wider. The rink, I got more time and everything. It's like you think you do, but you still have to like act quick because guys still will close the gap. So it's like, okay, as soon as you got it, like they're there. So it's not like the rink's wider now. I have more time. It's just like the rink's wider, so I got to move quicker to get to that open space. And I think that's back to the defenseman. Like I can't stress enough. I mean, if a D can skate, then his gap is good and he's there. And again, it's better to come back through the middle of the ice than be on the outside because it is so wide. If they change sides, you have such a long way to go to like recover all the way to that weak side of the ice.
For sure. And it's funny. So you bring up Brendan Lemieux. Is he a little bit of a Josh Holden in him in terms of how he plays? Because I mean, he played with a lot of bite, and sort of seemed to be one of those players that got under the other team's skin, but had skill. Um, like, man, I look at your first season in the Swiss league. You played for Freiburg.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there's an exchange rate on penalty minutes when you go to Europe. Like a European penalty is worth actually like maybe 6, man. But you played 44 games, 127 minutes in penalties, 14 games in the playoffs, 84 minutes in penalties. Like, but you're still producing offensively. Like were you like the Ogie Oglethorpe of the National League in those first few years?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Yeah, there's no excuse for that.
But you were effective. But I could see like hold on a second. I mean, I look at your reaction, but then we just saw an example: 3 fights in 9 seconds to open up the U.S.-Canada game. Like that was clearly done strategically. Like at the end of the day, like it's not comfortable playing against somebody that's a little bit unpredictable at any level.
So I think I heard Chris Pronger. I think he's pretty interesting what he's doing there with his how he talks and giving his speeches. And one thing that he had said that he had kind of resonated with me was he said like he created an alter ego. And I think like if you think about hockey players, like as hockey players are performers, right? So within that performance, what can you do to draw attention? Like, and whether it's good or bad, like you want to do something. So the first year I left North America, went to Europe, I went to Finland. And Finland's very similar to North America at the time. It was more like dump and chase. It was forecheck. It was hard. Like if you didn't have your head up, like, and the Finns, man, they're tough. Like they're not necessarily like fighting wise, but like you go in the corner with one, they're big boys. And they love that powerlifting and everything. So I learned a lot that year. So the transition from North America to Finland, still playing North American style, was okay. But then going to Switzerland, I still kept that, where it was just like, hey, finish your checks, get in there, get bumps. And I remember I got a penalty one time for hitting a guy, and I got a 5 in a game. So that's a 5-minute penalty, and a game is kind of like, that's 20 minutes. That's 25 minutes that you get.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. So that's why a few of those look pretty bad. But yeah, and then weeks later, playing, and that same ref came over and said, "Hey, Josh, like, hey, take it easy tonight." I said, "Yeah, but like, I mean, we're playing hockey, like I just like why'd you give me that penalty last time?" He goes, "You hit him too hard." So I was like,
"That's it, yeah."
Like I just skated away, like I don't even know what to say. Like I hit him too hard. Like I finished my check and I hit him too hard. Like it wasn't like, hey, you elbowed him in the head, or hey, it was a direct head contact, or hey, you hit him from behind. Like it wasn't like boarding, like a dangerous position.
What's the appropriate level that you can hit someone? How do you measure that? I
don't know.
But I can. I think what's interesting about it though is, I think we're seeing, internationally, and it's probably just from people sharing information. Like we're kind of seeing our game getting blended. I like to think in a good way. And again, I think we see it on display internationally where it's equal levels hard and it's equal levels skilled. And these two things can coexist. They don't have to be mutually exclusive in how we play the game. And I think from a fan's perspective, man, when you can combine those two things, I don't know if there's a more entertaining sport on the planet.
100%. I totally agree. And I think you listen to PK Subban, what he's been talking about there about compared to
Yeah.
basketball and like all-star games and stuff. Like, and there's some truth to it. Like guys play hurt. Like
Yeah.
every hockey player will have their story. Like they're playing with a broken nose or playing with a half-closed eye or playing with a broken foot or whatever. Like guys always have those stories of like, yeah, it wasn't easy. I went through it, but like I wanted to win. I wanted to help my team. I didn't want to let them down.
Yeah.
So that drive is great. And I really agree. Like I don't know, like being in Europe for so long, I don't know if the fighting is totally necessary now because we go through games now where there aren't fights and guys are able to make a statement without that. So, but it's part of the entertainment. I get it. But the skill part of it, I think it's when it's really integrated. And like when you go back to the Four Nations tournament, you're watching the best of the best, which is going to be super exciting now for the Olympics, I think, and hope. Like I kind of getting ready for that. Like now it's kind of brought a whole new picture back to hockey of like the competitiveness that goes into like these small kind of like tournaments. It is a great game.
No, it is for sure. And you talked a lot about when you first came to Davos about habits and daily habits, and just really the emphasis being on players just becoming the best version of themselves on and off the ice, which I think is, should frankly be the basis that all coaches approach, right? Because we can't always, especially for a lot of the coaches listening, we don't have a GM. We can't just go out and sign players. We have to work with what we have, and you got to find ways to be successful, outside the scoreboard. And I think what you have described is exactly that. Can you give some examples of daily habits that aren't hockey related that you might emphasize with your group or that you think are just important in terms of, the big picture and just having a healthy and productive hockey team?
Yeah. So if we could take a couple of steps back, I mean, we have to evaluate routines, right? So what are guys doing on those days? A few areas, of course, one is nutrition. Some guys are all in, some guys still eat like the Swiss
They
mountain
like their
food.
candy over in Europe.
Yeah, Switzerland not so much, but
Okay.
you're right, they do. But in Switzerland, they like a lot of heavy meals. Kind of like
Okay.
so you get like the schnitzel, you get the pommes, you get like big wurst with like big wieners, like a big meat wiener. Like I mean, it's yeah. Some of the pregame meals that I came into last year, I was just like, this is great coaches' food.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
guys that are playing a game tonight, like,
Yeah.
what is going on here?
Yeah.
So it's been adjusted, and now we're trying to help. But what we do is we go to local restaurants around the town here to try to support them. So we don't have game day meals in our dressing room. We like go out and have one there,
Oh, how
see
cool. So
some
like,
different.
so you kind of have like the group gets together on game day, little team
Yeah,
meeting.
so we game
Oh,
day
amazing.
meals. The team goes out and we go to different restaurants. So then we see people there. We thank the chefs. We thank the people that work. Maybe there's some people in there and say hi to them. And if we win, they're happy. If they lose, they let us know. So but it's all part of it. So doing that is fun. But the one part of those routines is like, okay, what could we adjust? Another area, one is nutrition. The other area is we brought in a guy who's kind of like the lead of our off ice department with the physios and the condition trainer and our coach. He's an osteomed, so it's like body mechanics. So yeah, so it's almost like a chiropractor kind of, but he doesn't necessarily crack your back. So if you come in and say like, hey, my back's sore, like or my something's wrong with my back. Okay, let's see. So he does some tests and he'll have you stand on one leg, stand on the other leg. Okay, bend forward. He checks to see if your spine's aligned. Then he looks at your shoulders. Then he looks at your neck. So he has a whole thing. And he's been doing this for years, and it's quite popular in Europe, and they have schooling for it, where he will do his testing and then he'll adjust something else. So he'll be like, it's not your back, like it's your left hip, it's compensating. So, hey, do this. And he says, hey, do these exercises for the next 5 days. Just, do these 3 exercises. So once a week, him or his apprentice, they'll be up here in Davos. And then the guys will set up times and they can do it. And then once every 6 weeks, they're here for a whole day. And then they evaluate the guys, like, how are you doing your exercises? They're like, okay, how's it going? And all that. So basically what the challenge is for the players is that they have to do kind of like a pre-warm up. So it's something that they do. It's 5-10 minutes of those exercises, which lead into their warm up, which would lead into their off ice. But
But it's personalized.
it's personalized. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Does that help? Do you think like the players would just like from overall being a part of the group to know that, hey, like there's a plan here for just me and making me better? And
yeah, I speak from experience with the guy that we brought up because I had him in Zug. He was there for 17 years. Well, he still lives in Zug, which is near Zurich, so 2 hours away, but they drive up. And we convinced him to be a part of what we're trying to do. And there's some days where I went in to see him as just like, there's no way I'm playing tomorrow. And he goes, okay, do this, do that. Does some alignment, does some movements, and next day I play. He also challenged me with my gut health, like just what does your diet look like? What do you eat the day before games? Okay, what if you do this? What if you do that? So readjusted my diet. And I think doing that, I think I was like 36, 37 years old. I think it gave me a few extra years.
No way.
Yeah, I that's just my belief. So I'm a big fan. But so doing that stuff and individualizing it, and when you have a guy saying, hey, do this, and then he's checking in with you, hey, do you like it or not? Oh, okay, it's not working. Okay, try this, try that. It's the individualization thing to like help guys is good without making them feel like, okay, it's like I always feel good. Like I need to feel good. It's like you're not always going to feel good. But hey, if you do this, this will help you. Like we're back to the injuries, right? Guys are always going to play hurt. So you're never going to be 100% as a hockey player. You might be 70, 80, 90, but you always got a little something. You didn't sleep well. The kids were up last night, so recovery rate, energy's low. There's always a little something. So we always don't worry about feeling good. Just really like the mechanics of your body. Are they aligned? Are you able to do what you need to do? Okay, let's go.
Well, I think in a sport, and I'm sure your league is no different, like where there's, probably a bit of a copycat league and, what happens on the ice, like there's some edges or advantages you can gain there, but there's a whole host of other advantages and edge that you can get off the ice. And that would appear to be, I mean, even now, like in the National Hockey League, like there was a great article that came out in the Athletic in the past few weeks. And it was just talking about how, it was one former player mentioning, he said, like, when I first got to the league, a veteran player told me, like, if you can't play in this league hungover, you cannot play in the National Hockey League. And he's like, now he goes, I feel I'm the veteran player, but he's like, these young kids, like they don't need to be told to get to bed on time. Like they're just so dialed into their sleep and their recovery and all these things that this is just how they've been brought up to play. And it's, but obviously it goes without saying, it makes a difference, right? Like your gut health makes a difference in how you show up.
Honestly, it's really funny. You asked earlier about the 1% things, right?
Yeah.
Those are them knowing,
100%, yeah.
Knowing when to have a little blowout with the guys or your buddies or your girlfriend or wife or whatever, and like when not to, And I think that that's something that also like in Europe is interesting because the kids can drink a lot younger here, right? Like legally, like they can have beers at like 15, 16 years old. So it's like, yeah, okay, have a beer here and there. Like it just kind of becomes, they've already done that. And then once you're playing pro, it's just like, or even junior, like, yes, of course they go out and they have some fun with their friends, but it's
maybe not the rite of passage that we grew up with. Yeah.
No, no, thank goodness.
Yeah. When you look back on, I mean, you played for some, and albeit for different lengths of time, but man, you played for some pretty accomplished coaches. And I want to get to some of those names, but I'd be curious too. Like I look around the Swiss League. I mean, God, you mentioned Jeff Ward in Lausanne. He's in first place right now. Mark Crawford's won a Stanley Cup. Dan Tangnes, who, I mean, we haven't touched on him yet in your time with him, but I mean, there's a lot of really, really good coaches in your league. I'd be curious to know, is there a bit of a fraternity there amongst you guys in terms of, sharing ideas and all, but just in general, as a first time head coach, like how much does that push you to be on top of your game? Just knowing that on a nightly basis, you're playing, I mean, you're coaching against some of the best in the world, literally.
Yeah, it's extremely humbling, to be honest. Like I wake up every day with the approach, like I'm all in today.
Yeah.
Like
You have to be.
because yeah, it's the only way. Like I don't want to wake up tomorrow and be like, oh, if I would have done this or if I would have talked to him, try to like make sure like all in for that day, and then whatever happens happens. Because in sports, you never know. So there's no sense worrying about 2 weeks from now or in 1 year from now or whatever or what happened for it. It's like just on to the next one. But there are some guys that I do talk to, see before the games. They're a little bit more open. Some other guys, it could be some language barriers. Like there's some Finnish guys, some Swedish guys that maybe aren't as comfortable speaking English, so or just go about their business. But there's no real camaraderie between everybody. Like there's no meetings that we have or anything like that, which in a way is kind of disappointing. But I'd say like the guy I talk to the most is probably Dan, because I worked with him, and then other coaches that I have worked with in Zug before. I keep in contact with some of those guys as well. So with that being said, sometimes we talk about situations or what they see, just to exchange ideas, because I would be open to talking to more guys or joining more coaching things, because I feel it is interesting. But again, sometimes during the season with that washing machine, like it just doesn't. It's hard to get out and
Yeah.
have a pause cycle there for a second, because you're kind of okay. What's next? What's next? But
Well, if I was your personal advisor, Josh, I'd be like, forget that. Like, if you're getting some free time, you get a pause button. Like, go hit the ski hill. But that would just be me.
fair enough.
Do you stay in touch with Ted Sukinen in Zug?
I haven't talked to him in a while, but I have. I did speak with him. I spoke with him over during the summertime. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's been a while now, but he's usually pretty busy during the summer. And I reached out to him just some ideas on ozone stuff that he works with. He's open too. He's a
Yeah.
good guy.
No, he's
Yeah.
yeah. I fortunately I get to chat with him once or twice a year, but every time I
Yeah.
do, I feel like I learn it. I learn a ton.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so for anybody that Googles your name,
Right.
right? One of the things that comes up is that there was an incident at the Spengler Cup, which you won last season with the player Tomas Jurco, who I think spent a little bit of time in the National League in Detroit. And it was an incident on the bench. And um, I think there's two sides to this. I think one, anybody that watches that is probably going to say, hey, like that's not the way you want to do it. At the same time, anybody, especially that's coached for long enough, like everybody has, I think, crossed the line. And I think that it's sometimes in our sport, we forget that if our goal is that nobody's ever going to come close or cross the line, like that's just unrealistic. And we got to give people opportunities to grow and learn from their experiences, just like, we preach to players. I would just be curious, going through that experience, how do you come out of that on the other side as a coach?
Let's get one thing straight. Like Tomas Jurco is a good hockey player, and
Yeah,
when you have your better hockey players or extremely skilled hockey players or hardworking guys, whatever, you kind of have the same expectations and kind of same team values that you want to have, and that
sure.
you want to keep all those guys accountable for. So there just was a situation on the. I saw different things. Some people said that was my response to him missing a breakaway, and some this and that. It's like, no, there was a small situation that happened where I felt from watching that he kind of gave up on the play, and then changed while they had the puck and were going the other way. So it was just kind of like, hey, and all I said to him was, hey, don't change, don't change. And then I just was like, hey, just don't quit on the play. And then the camera came to me, and there's no right or wrong here. I'm not trying to make up excuses, just try to like give a different perspective. But I think, like you said, there's two different ways to look at it. Some people will say like, see the game of hockey as just like fun and energetic, and it should just be light and easy. And some other people will see the situation of like of us right in the heart of an opportunity to win a championship, win something. So emotions are a little bit higher, and of course, as humans, sometimes those emotions just go over the edge.
Totally.
And of course, the emotion was more just to like, all I was telling them was just hey, like just don't quit on the play, like just stay active, just keep playing, you know. And I've done the same thing this year to certain guys, but it just was unfortunate. I put my hand on his shoulder, and it was taken in an extremely aggressive way, which it wasn't trying to be at all. It just was like, hey, just stay active, bud. That. So sometimes it's hard when just the situation is just in the microscope. It would have been great to have seen the whole thing. I'm not making excuses, but again, I really try not to. I try to coach more like my own personality, and my more personality is more like more neutral, more teaching, and more encouraging and nurturing than dictator, like behind, you have to do this, you have to do this, create robots and everything. And so, yeah, for sure, definitely shouldn't have put my hands on him there on his shoulder, but it was more of like just trying to keep him in check there. That he's a big part of what we're doing, and we need you to, just keep playing, bud.
Well, no, listen, man. I think that I think this is why it's important because when it doesn't matter what level you're at, we're all coaching. There's cameras on, some real cameras, some on phones, and I think coaches are under a lot of scrutiny. And I think until you've been in the fight, like it's really tough to relate to what that's like. But I think I bring this up just to say I think there's kind of this give and take with coaches and where we all have to adjust just because things can get taken way out of context when you shorten a sound bite to just specific words, or you shrink a video clip down to 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And the perception of that. And I think that, frankly, like if I'm being honest, like I think like when we talk with, National Hockey League coaches, like they talk about like that is the biggest thing that they have to adjust to as being a head coach, is being in front of that mic and knowing that if you don't use your words the right way, or you talk about body language, if your body language on the bench, like, because you're always under a microscope and controlling that narrative. And I just think like I said, I really appreciate talking about it because I think it's a good teachable moment for all of us of, this is just the reality and we gotta, and it's not, and it's, I guess what I'm trying to say, it's not easy. It is such an emotionally charged game and it's not easy, to be, neutral all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Again, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it because, like, again, like I want to show him some respect too. Like, it wasn't anything towards him as an individual; it just was more of a situation that I just was trying to make sure that we do everything we can because I just really felt like we were right there. We're in a championship. We're in Davos. If we win it now, I think Davos and Team Canada are tied for 16 Spengler Cup wins each.
Oh, wow.
So now it's right there. So would really like to try to get that next one to take the one step ahead.
Yeah, no
But
kidding.
so again, just the emotion, the excitement, and everything kind of on the line. Yeah. But like you said, I'm thanks for the opportunity to just clarify again, not to make excuses, but just to let everybody know it wasn't a perfect situation for me, but I've learned from it and hopefully trying to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, no doubt, man. What is what's the one thing when you make a transition from being an assistant coach to a head coach that you can't learn until you're in it and you learn it?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is realizing that basically the whole plan is on you.
Yeah.
Because before you kind of hide, like, so as assistant coach for Dan for 5 years, I wasn't necessarily doing everything for him. Like, he challenged us in a different way. Like, we had to have our own ideas and our own thoughts to put on the table to help him, and then he put the puzzle together. And that's kind of the same thing now. Like, you're responsible for that plan. So if it works or doesn't work, ultimately you got to stand in front. And I'll always tell our guys, like, I'll take the outcome. I'll stand in front of it. Like, I'm not going to blame you guys and stand out. Goalies were bad or defense sucked or, there's always improvements, but I'm not going to blame individuals. I'll take it if it doesn't work, as long as you guys do your best to execute it, and that's execution within that. But that's from assistant coach to head coach. As head coach, sometimes you feel alone.
You know what, man? I think that is maybe not advice, but it's so important to point out because, I mean, listen, it's really easy to watch a game on TV and critique it, right? But as you said, like when I'm going to make this decision, and somebody, only one person can make the decision, I guess,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And it's like an entrepreneur, right? Like they make 1,000 decisions a year for their company, right? Like, okay, should we do this? What should we do this, right? As a coach, you're making 1,000 decisions, maybe per period, maybe per game, and you're doing that day after day after day. And all those decisions, there's a lot of thinking and then that goes into that. And sometimes when it's going good then or going well and things are on a roll, that's where you don't want to lose your what's making you good, and those details. If you let the details slide during that time, that's when it catches up with you later. Like because maybe you weren't on top of things when things were going good, and then things start to go bad, and then or you start to lose a few games, or you get some injuries, or something goes against you, and if you're not ahead of that curve with a plan, then then you're kind of chasing the season or chasing the games, and that's probably one of the biggest things I learned from Dan was just make sure you got a plan. So your plan starts the night before. It doesn't start like when you walk into the rink.
yeah. Totally, totally. I think, and I'm sure that that's a part of experience, being able to look around those corners and know what's coming down the pipe and being able to anticipate. Again, you mentioned Dan. When you got hired, you refer to your 5 years working with him as a master class in coaching. He's an interesting dude, smart guy. What when you talk about a master class in coaching, and I mean, you don't need to go in super in depth, but is there one or two things that kind of stand out in addition to maybe just having that plan that really influenced you?
Yeah. I think you're right. And I would love to take the opportunity to really thank him, because, you know, he always used to challenge me every day. And I think that's part of the reason why I ended up being able to interview here in Davos is because Jan Alston, who's the GM in Davos now, he was the GM in Lausanne at the time. And we were down there and he asked me, hey, how you liking it? How's coaching? What are you thinking? I'm like, man, this guy, he's on me every day. And he's like, oh, what do you mean? And I just said, if I don't come in with hey, what do you want to do today? Who are you going to talk to? How are you going to help them? Do you have clips? What drills do you want to do? If I didn't come in with a plan, he's just like, what are you doing here? So it's you were already in your preparation mode, way before. And that led to a lot of proactiveness in coaching, having different situations in mind that could occur. So when the game starts, what could happen? You could lose your number one center first shift, or the other team could get a 5-minute PP or a 5-minute PK. You start the game like that. So having a bunch of scenarios in your mind of ideas ahead, I think that's something that he's really good at. And I think just that whole hockey puzzle as a coach of taking things, putting it together. And I think we were talking earlier about what happened yesterday. Was it a practice? Was it a game? Was it a day off? Whatever. What are we going to do today? And connect yesterday into today. And then what are we going to do today that will connect to tomorrow? So it's not we're coming in and be oh, last night, Team Canada, that goal they scored in overtime, this is our new ozone play. Maybe we could show the guys and just be hey, sometimes when there's pressure that weak side rim, it can be good, just to have an out. Or hey, here's the F3 popping up into that little pocket of space. Hey, here's a good reminder. But you don't want to take something and totally change what you're trying to do. So staying on top of what our base structure is, making small adjustments according to how we're playing, what our clientele is, injuries, or even performance-wise. If a guy's not scoring, can we give him something more simple to help?
Yeah.
I think the other part of it, I think his honesty. He's extremely honest. And sometimes that came across as some people didn't like it. But when you step back and step away and reevaluate, it's just yeah, okay, he's pretty good. So he's got a really good way of working with people, challenging them, finding triggers to get them going, and being honest within that. And I used to joke around and kind of he has a bit of a Rain Man kind of type thing with his head, and because he would remember. Because I was in charge of video sometimes, and we would always have our meetings at say 10:30 in the morning, right before pregame skate. And at I think I had a record the PK would go first, and they would start at 10:30. So the PK was being showed, and then we would do the 5-on-5. And at like 10:32, he's just like, "Hey, I want that clip from, like 2 games ago against Bern, like that ozone play, like where so and so gets the chance to do it." And I'd be like, "What? It's 10,
Yeah.
10:32."
Yeah.
So he's just like, "Wait, okay." And so I
Seller's underwear.
Oh, yeah. So I got to the point where I was always prepared, knowing he was going to ask me for something. So I'd have in my mind, okay, what's he going to ask me? Where am I going to have to go? And I'd just be like, okay, boom, 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 get the clip, add it in. Where do you want it? He's like, yeah, third clip down. He's like, you got it? I'm like, yeah. And we would walk into the meeting, and he'd just like walk in. All right, boys, here's the plan today. Here we go. Yeah. Like 2 minutes before, and then we'd walk out of the meeting. Like he just gave like this. He's really good at giving speeches. I think I heard somebody say John Cooper was also like really good at giving speeches for his guys. Dan was the same. And he'd come in and he'd sit down in the office and he'd be over on his computer. He'd just be like this. Like, hey, what are you like? Oh, hey, it was a good talk. He's like, yeah. Leave me alone. It's like, what? And he'd come around and he'd be like on there, like shopping for wine or looking for a holiday or like, just he could completely separate from his work. So like he's got a really good gift of like, hey, when it's like back to like when we work for a purpose. And when it's time to recover, have a hobby, have something else, do something else. Like he's like all in. Here it is. I got my job done, and then he can like relax and he can really separate that side of it, which is a gift in itself too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing you just said there, I think it's so important. It's like the message could be anything, but the players seeing that the coaches believe in it, or at least they show that they believe in it and they're all in, like that in itself, like nothing sells like that. You know what I mean? Like when if you can go up there for 5 minutes and, create that sense of belief, like the X's and O's, not that they're inconsequential, but they're probably not as important as just that gaining that buy-in. You know what, man, you've played for, and I always think this is so fascinating having these conversations with who you played for. Cause I was going back in and I'm like, holy cow. So again, different times, but like, man, true or false, did you, cause you couldn't tell with maybe some of the dates, but did you break into the NHL with Mike Keenan?
Yes, I did.
Holy
and
cow.
the same year, then had Mark Crawford. So they had the fire, or Keenan got fired, and then they brought Crawford in. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I just chatting with some of our local alumni that were a part of that era of Canucks. Like, there's some stories. So I can only imagine what that was like. As a young guy, Mike Babcock's an assistant coach on Team Pacific.
Yep.
Paul Maurice in Carolina, Pat Quinn in Toronto. You mentioned your time in Finland. You played for Jukka Jalonen, who, has obviously went on to be the head coach of their national team. Tons of success. He's with Team Italy now.
Yep.
Anything that when you look back on in hindsight, where you're like, hey, like that thing that coach did has kind of become part of my own coaching DNA, or something that just stood out and say, if I ever get a chance, I want to do it that way too.
Yeah. I think 2 guys stand out in a really interesting way. One is Paul Maurice. I had him in Carolina. I was there for 8 games, just a cup of coffee, and then back on waivers, back to Vancouver, straight to Winnipeg. That was a tough year because when I went there, I remember I talked with Paul Maurice. He said, listen, you're going to be fourth line center. Talk to Ron Francis, watch Ron Francis, learn from everything. When there's injuries, you're going to move up. So along the way, just learn. And that was like the first meeting. So I was like, okay. But how he coached and how he taught, he just had like a calmness, somewhat humor, like dry. So it wasn't like he was like trying to crack jokes. He would say stuff, but with the same coaching face. So it's kind of like, do you laugh or don't you? But he kept it light, but then he would be like hard, like in that situation. And he always had like a presence that just felt like comforting and real, whereas some guys, sometimes it was more of like there was no ego into it. There was no hidden message in it. It just was like clear, direct, calm, straightforward. And that was always intriguing. And I'd always kind of wished I could have learned from that more, because I went back to that. So I would love to give him some respect and congratulations on finally getting his first Stanley Cup there.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I was from a 8-game, 4-week stint, whatever it was in Carolina. He kind of touched me in a good way and gave me some good memories. So I want to congratulate him for that. And then the other is Jukka Jalonen. I had him in Finland when he was like a club team coach. And how he worked was extremely interesting. Similar, like calm, straightforward. Again, a lot of it was in Finnish.
Yeah. So that's,
but again, if you and I, if we go to Italy and we're in see two Italians talking, like they're like all over the place, right? Like
yeah.
in each other's face, their personality is different. And sometimes Finns are more reserved, but his calmness, the way he talked to the team, it was sometimes aggressive to get us going. But when he would talk to me, it was always like, again, clear information. It wasn't no like fluff or like all over the place or this or that. It's just like, hey, I need you to do this. Hey, you do this. This is good. Hey, I need you to do this more. Like, and then he would talk to me about it in that stuff. And I remember one game I was sick, shouldn't have been playing. And after like the second period, he's like, he called me Yossi. Yossi. He was Yossi. And he looks at me in the dressing room. He's like, are you alive? and it was just in a kind of like a funny way. And I was like, sorry, coach. And he's just like, you good? And I was like, yeah. He's like, okay. So we ended up playing. I think I scored in overtime. Like, I don't know.
No way.
Something something random. And he's just like, but he was always, I really respected him. And I ran into him a few times over the years, and he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, no, he's been on the show. And I would say he's at the we're hoping next year we're going to get him to come speak at our event. Yeah, he's got to get this whole Olympic thing off his plate. Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. And I would also say, like, as a coach, if somebody that played for you for 8 games is complimentary, that carries a lot of weight, in my opinion. Yeah, it was funny too. Yeah. The other guy you played for you had 2 stints was Steamer, Stan Smile.
Yeah,
yeah. And I was just recently was at a Canucks game hanging out with him, and just what a nice man. Like, I'm sure as a young, I mean, young, but I mean, we forget that pro players are still kids when they're starting out, and I can't imagine like what a great person to be around early.
Yeah, he was a great person, and I remember I had him for 3 years, Syracuse, then Kansas City, and then Winnipeg too, because I went to Carolina and then went back to Winnipeg. And that year in Winnipeg, it was just a tough go because I got picked up in the waiver draft and then went to Carolina. And then they said, like, okay, move your family here, get everything situated. You're going to be the 4th line center, blah, blah, blah. So everything's being moved there. And then while everything was being moved, I basically got put back on waivers, got picked back up by Vancouver, and then sent straight to Winnipeg. So that was a tough like kick. Like went from like, okay, here you are, you're playing, you're gonna get your chance, just wait, be here. So like, okay, back to the minors, and I knew that I wasn't gonna get called up. And they had already started their season and were flying. I think I went in and was playing like 4th line, then I just kind of like started fighting. To let out some frustration. I remember Stan came to the house one night and he's just like, Josh, like, what's up, bud? Like, and not a lot of coaches do that, but I remember, and I just felt so bad because cool. In a way I was kind of lost, because I was here, and then, you get sent down to the minors, you're not going to be one of the guys that get called up. All those other guys are there. And I just was like, just the situation wasn't good. And I always feel bad because I know that the people in Winnipeg, there's still some people that are there, Todd Ripplinger and those guys, and I wasn't very good. I was kind of a grumpy person. I've always felt bad for that. But anyway, Stan did come over and he really sat with a couple of hours and just tried to chat it out. And those little things, just getting back, like, again, we're all humans. It's emotional, but sometimes when you just try to reach a deeper level, that it goes a long way. So I've always been very grateful for him as a person.
Yeah, no, I appreciate saying he like I said, another really good dude in our game, and I think just really speaks to the importance of when people talk about relationships, like that's just it, right? Like the stuff on the ice doesn't work without that. Josh, just as we wrap up here, anything else that you've picked up in your coaching journey that you can pay it forward, just from the perspective of anybody that's looking to make that next jump in their career, and how they can maybe help them look around the corner?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me is I would encourage anybody just to, this is metaphorically speaking, but just if you want something, just kind of jump out of the airplane without the parachute. Just go for it.
Yeah.
And I just mean like, if there's a job opportunity. And I remember Todd McClelland came and spoke with us in Zug. and he was talking to these young coaches, and everybody was there. And he kind of used me as an example because we kind of unofficially knew each other a little bit, from he was coaching Swift Current when I was in Regina and blah, blah, blah.
That's right, yeah.
And he said, he goes, Josh, if you got offered a job, in some other country and this and that, and it was an opportunity, would you be willing to move? And I was just like, oh, yeah, I think so. And he goes, he didn't sound too convincing. He goes, like if you want to be a coach at some point, you're going to have to just step out and go. And that's kind of what I ended up doing last year, because I could have stayed in Zug, been there for 5 years, great relationship with Dan. The organization was great to me and my family for 15 years, right? We were there. And I just kind of had a thought back, and at the end of January, it was kind of like, yes or no, Josh, because otherwise we got to move on, and I just said like, okay, well, I'm going to go after something, and just try it. So I just kind of like jumped out, and I didn't have anything. I still was in the running for the job in Davos, doing the interviews and going through all that, and didn't find out until, beginning of March. So it was like 4 or 5 weeks where I was like, holy smokes, like maybe I should have stayed in my comfort zone, and just done that. And so I just would encourage somebody, if something's out there and they feel like, should I or shouldn't I, like you'll never know unless you just throw yourself out there and jump in and go.
I think it's a great analogy you used. It just reminds me, there's Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, and he's a big tech guy, but he's got this great, he refers to entrepreneurship. He goes, it's like jumping off a cliff and trying to build the airplane on the way down. And I remember when I first heard that, I'm like, that's coaching too. So true, yeah. Right? Like that's just,
maybe I should use that one. Maybe that's better than no parachute.
Well, no, but it's the same thing, right? Like
just go for it. Just go for it.
You got to go for, no, that's it. You never know, right? You never know. Hey, Josh, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your story. And man, again, from an outsider's perspective, we're fortunate to talk to coaches who have accumulated so many cool experiences, but the one that you're enjoying in Davos right now seems like, right at the top. What a great experience. Well, best of luck to you guys.
Yeah. Hey, I really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to join you guys. I've been following you for a number of years. So keep doing this good work. And I think this is like a great platform for anybody that's out there just to kind of pick up some stuff to help each other out. So thanks for doing this. And if you please come and visit, you need to see the Spengler Cup live in person.